What if I told you that history is not just a series of events, but a web of strange, almost unbelievable connections? Picture this: two presidents, born a century apart, both assassinated in eerily similar ways, their lives mirroring each other in ways that defy explanation. Or imagine a novel written 14 years before the Titanic sank, describing a shipwreck with chilling accuracy. These aren't just random stories, they're historical coincidences that make you question everything you thought you knew about the past. Welcome to a journey through 25 of the most mind-blowing historical coincidences that will leave you wondering if fate, chance, or something even stranger is at play. From mysterious disappearances to uncanny parallels, these events challenge our understanding of history and remind us that sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. So, buckle up and get ready to explore the twists and turns of history that will make you rethink the past. By the end of this video, you'll see history in a whole new light and maybe even question if some things are truly just coincidences. Let's dive in. Now, let's step into one of the most famous and eerie coincidences in history: the uncanny parallels between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. At first glance, these two presidents seem worlds apart, separated by a century and vastly different eras. But when you look closer, the similarities are so striking that it's hard to believe they're just random chance. Both Lincoln and Kennedy were deeply committed to civil rights, with Lincoln abolishing slavery and Kennedy pushing for racial equality during the civil rights movement. Their political careers were marked by a shared vision of progress, but their lives were tragically cut short by assassinations that shocked the world. Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater while Kennedy was killed in a Ford-made car, a detail that adds another layer of strangeness to their stories. Even their names hold a peculiar connection. Lincoln's secretary was named Kennedy, and Kennedy's secretary was named Lincoln. Both men were succeeded by vice presidents named Andrew Johnson for Lincoln and Lyndon B. Johnson for Kennedy. And here's another twist: Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, while Kennedy was elected in 1946, exactly 100 years later. But perhaps the most chilling similarity lies in their assassinations. Lincoln was shot on a Friday in the presence of his wife by a man named John Wilkes Booth. Kennedy was also shot on a Friday with his wife by his side by Lee Harvey Oswald. Booth and Oswald were both Southerners with 3 names, and both were killed before they could stand trial. These parallels have fascinated historians and conspiracy theorists alike, sparking debates about whether these similarities are mere coincidences or something more. Some believe it's a cosmic twist of fate, while others see it as a reminder of how history can echo itself in unexpected ways. Whatever the explanation, the Lincoln-Kennedy parallels remain one of history's most intriguing mysteries, leaving us to wonder if some connections are simply too strange to ignore. As we move forward, let's explore another astonishing coincidence, one that involves a novel that seemed to predict one of the greatest maritime disasters in history. Now, let's dive into another astonishing coincidence that seems almost too strange to be true: the eerie connection between the sinking of the Titanic and a novel written 14 years before the disaster. In 1898, author Morgan Robertson published a book titled Futility, which tells the story of a massive, supposedly unsinkable ocean liner named the Titan. Sound familiar? The similarities between the fictional Titan and the real-life Titanic are nothing short of chilling. Both ships were described as the largest and most luxurious of their time, designed to carry thousands of passengers across the Atlantic. Both were deemed unsinkable by their creators, a claim that would prove tragically wrong, and both met their fate in the icy waters of the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg. But the coincidences don't stop there. The Titan in Robertson's novel was around 800 feet long, while the Titanic measured 882 feet. Both ships carried far fewer lifeboats than needed, a decision driven by overconfidence in their safety, and both disasters occurred in April, with the Titan sinking on its maiden voyage, just like the Titanic. What makes this story even more unsettling is the fact that Robertson's novel was published over a decade before the Titanic was even built. Some have speculated that Robertson had a prophetic vision, while others argue it was simply a case of uncanny foresight. After all, the late 19th and early 20th centuries were a time of rapid advancements in shipbuilding, and the idea of a massive, luxurious ocean liner wasn't entirely far-fetched. Yet, the level of detail in Robertson's novel is hard to dismiss. From the ship's size and lack of lifeboats to the specific cause of its sinking, the parallels are so precise that they've sparked endless debates about whether this was a case of extraordinary coincidence or something more mysterious. As we reflect on this strange connection, it's hard not to wonder if history sometimes gives us glimpses of what's to come, or if perhaps some stories are destined to repeat themselves in ways we can't fully explain. Next, we'll shift our focus to a completely different kind of historical oddity, one that involves an unlikely enemy and a war that's as bizarre as it is unforgettable. Now, let's turn our attention to a historical event so peculiar that it almost feels like it was plucked from the pages of a satirical novel, the Great Emu War of 1932. Yes, you heard that right. This was a real conflict, and the unlikely enemy, emus. In the early 1930s, Australia was grappling with the aftermath of World War I and the Great Depression. Farmers in Western Australia were struggling to make ends meet, and to make matters worse, they faced an unexpected threat: thousands of emus migrating into their farmland. These large, flightless birds began devouring crops and destroying fences, leaving farmers desperate for a solution. Enter the Australian military. In a move that seems almost too absurd to believe, the government deployed soldiers armed with machine guns to deal with the emu problem. Yes, soldiers with machine guns against birds. The operation was led by Major G.P.W. Meredith, who likely never imagined his military career would involve battling emus. The campaign, however, did not go as planned. Emus, it turns out, are surprisingly resilient and difficult to target. They scattered quickly, making it nearly impossible for the soldiers to achieve any significant impact. After several days of fruitless efforts, the military withdrew, leaving the emus victorious. The Great Emu War quickly became a source of both embarrassment and amusement. Newspapers at the time mocked the military's inability to handle what many saw as a trivial problem. Yet, this bizarre event also highlighted the challenges faced by farmers during a time of economic hardship, adding a layer of seriousness to an otherwise comical situation. Over time, the Great Emu War has taken on a life of its own in popular culture. It's often cited as an example of humanity's occasional overconfidence and the unpredictability of nature. Today, it's remembered not just as a historical oddity, but as a reminder that sometimes even the most well-laid plans can go hilariously awry. As we move forward, we'll explore another historical coincidence that's equally fascinating but far more mysterious: the disappearance of Louis XVII during the French Revolution and the strange coincidences surrounding his fate. Now, let's step into the shadows of the French Revolution, where one of history's most enduring mysteries unfolds: the disappearance of Louis XVII, also known as the Lost Dauphin. This young prince, the son of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, vanished under mysterious circumstances during one of the most turbulent periods in French history. His fate has sparked countless theories, debates, and even a series of impostors who claimed to be the lost heir. Louis XVII was just a child when the French Revolution erupted. After the execution of his parents in 1793, he was imprisoned in the Temple Tower in Paris. Officially, he died there in 1795 at the age of 10, reportedly from illness and neglect. However, rumors quickly spread that he had escaped or been smuggled out of prison, leading to decades of speculation about his true fate. What makes this story even more intriguing is the sheer number of individuals who later came forward claiming to be the lost dolphin. Over the years, more than 100 imposters emerged, each with their own elaborate tales of survival. One of the most famous was Karl Wilhelm Naundorf, a German clockmaker who insisted he was the rightful heir to the French throne. He even managed to gather a following and took his case to court, though his claims were ultimately dismissed. The coincidences surrounding these imposters are nothing short of astonishing. Many of them bore striking physical resemblances to the royal family, and some even possessed knowledge of private details about the dolphin's life that seemed impossible for an outsider to know. These factors fueled the belief that at least one of them might have been telling the truth. Historians have long debated whether Louis XVII truly died in prison or if he managed to escape. In the early 2000s, DNA testing on a heart believed to be his provided strong evidence that he did indeed perish in captivity. Yet the mystery persists as the story of the lost dolphin has become a symbol of hope, survival, and the enduring allure of royal intrigue. As we leave the enigmatic tale of Louis XVII behind, we'll turn our attention to another eerie historical coincidence: the so-called Curse of Tippecanoe and its chilling connection to the deaths of several U.S. presidents. Now, shifting our focus across the Atlantic, we arrive at one of the most chilling coincidences in American history, the so-called Curse of Tippecanoe. This eerie pattern, also known as the zero-year curse, revolves around the untimely deaths of several U.S. presidents elected in years ending with zero. The story begins in the early 19th century with a fateful clash between Native American forces and U.S. troops led by William Henry Harrison. In 1811, Harrison, then a military commander, defeated a confederation of Native American tribes at the Battle of Tippecanoe. According to legend, the Shawnee leader Tecumseh, or his brother Tenskwatawa, placed a curse on Harrison and future U.S. leaders, declaring that every president elected in a year ending with zero would die in office. Whether the curse was real or simply a series of tragic coincidences, the pattern that followed is undeniably striking. The curse seemingly claimed its first victim with Harrison himself. Elected in 1840, he delivered the longest inaugural address in U.S. history on a cold, rainy day without a coat. He fell ill shortly after and died of pneumonia just 1 month into his presidency. From there, the pattern continued. Abraham Lincoln, elected in 1860, was assassinated in 1865. James Garfield, elected in 1880, was shot and killed in 1881. William McKinley, elected in 1900, met a similar fate when he was assassinated in 1901. Even in the 20th century, the curse appeared to hold. Warren Harding, elected in 1920, died of a heart attack in 1923. Franklin D. Roosevelt, elected in 1940, passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage in 1945. And John F. Kennedy, elected in 1960, was assassinated in 1963. While some dismiss the curse as mere coincidence, others point to the statistical improbability of such a pattern occurring by chance. Historians have debated whether the curse reflects a deeper historical trend or simply a series of unfortunate events. Regardless of its origins, the Curse of Tippecanoe remains a fascinating and unsettling chapter in American history, blending folklore, tragedy, and the unpredictable nature of fate. As we leave the shadow of this presidential curse behind, we'll turn our attention to another moment that reshaped the world: the Roswell UFO incident and its role in sparking modern conspiracy theories. Now, let's journey to the deserts of New Mexico, where a single event in 1947 would ignite a cultural phenomenon that continues to captivate the world: the Roswell UFO incident. What began as a routine discovery of debris on a ranch near Roswell quickly spiraled into one of the most debated and mysterious events in modern history. It all started in early July of 1947, when rancher Mac Brazel stumbled upon strange metallic fragments scattered across his property. Intrigued and puzzled, he reported his findings to local authorities, who initially announced that a flying disc had been recovered. The news spread like wildfire, sparking headlines and public fascination. However, within hours, the military retracted the statement, claiming the debris was from a weather balloon. This sudden reversal only fueled speculation. Why the abrupt change in explanation? What were they trying to hide? For many, the official story didn't add up. Witnesses came forward with accounts of unusual materials and even alleged sightings of alien bodies. The coincidental timing of the incident, just as the Cold War was heating up and public interest in science fiction was surging, made it the perfect storm for conspiracy theories to take root. The Roswell incident didn't just capture imaginations, it fundamentally reshaped how people viewed the unknown. It marked the beginning of modern UFO culture, inspiring countless books, documentaries, and even government investigations. The idea that extraterrestrial life might have visited Earth became a cornerstone of conspiracy thinking, blending skepticism of authority with a fascination for the unexplained. What makes Roswell particularly intriguing is how it reflects broader societal anxieties. In the aftermath of World War II and during the early years of the Cold War, people were grappling with rapid technological advancements and the fear of the unknown. The Roswell incident became a lens through which these fears were expressed, giving rise to a new era of conspiracy theories that questioned official narratives and sought hidden truths. While skeptics argue that the Roswell incident was a case of misidentification and government secrecy, believers see it as undeniable proof of extraterrestrial contact. Regardless of where you stand, there's no denying the cultural impact of this event. It didn't just spark curiosity about UFOs, it laid the groundwork for the conspiracy culture that thrives today. As we leave the mysteries of Roswell behind, our next stop takes us to a moment where a single wrong turn changed the course of history: the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and the butterfly effect that followed. Now, let's turn our attention to a moment where a single, seemingly insignificant decision set off a chain reaction that would reshape the world: the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This event, often cited as the spark that ignited World War I, is a striking example of how small coincidences can have monumental consequences. It all began on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, Bosnia. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was visiting the city with his wife, Sophie. The couple's motorcade was making its way through the streets when a young Bosnian nationalist, Gavrilo Princip, attempted to assassinate the Archduke. His first attempt failed. A bomb thrown at the car missed its target and injured others in the procession. Shaken but unharmed, the Archduke decided to continue with his schedule. Here's where the coincidences begin to pile up. Later that day, the driver of the Archduke's car took a wrong turn, accidentally steering the vehicle down a side street. By sheer chance, Gavrilo Princip happened to be standing on that very corner. Seizing the opportunity, Princip stepped forward and fired 2 shots, fatally wounding both Franz Ferdinand and Sophie. This single act of violence set off a domino effect that would plunge the world into war. The assassination itself was shocking, but the coincidental timing and circumstances surrounding it are what make it truly mind-blowing. If the driver hadn't taken that wrong turn, if Princip hadn't been standing on that corner, or if the Archduke had chosen to cancel his visit after the first attempt, history might have taken a very different path. Instead, the assassination became the catalyst for a series of political alliances and declarations of war, leading to the outbreak of World War I just weeks later. What makes this event even more fascinating is how it illustrates the butterfly effect. The idea that small, seemingly random actions can have far-reaching and unpredictable consequences. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand didn't just change the course of one nation's history, it altered the trajectory of the entire 20th century. The war that followed reshaped borders, toppled empires, and set the stage for future conflicts, including World War II. As we reflect on this pivotal moment, it's impossible not to wonder how different the world might be if that driver had simply gone the right way. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand serves as a powerful reminder of how fragile history can be, shaped by chance and coincidence in ways we can scarcely imagine. Next, we'll explore another historical coincidence that turned a simple accident into one of the most devastating events in London's history: the Great Fire of London and the baker's oven that started it all. Now, let's step back in time to another moment where a small, seemingly mundane event spiraled into a catastrophe that would change a city forever: the Great Fire of London. This devastating fire, which began in the early hours of September 2nd, 1666, is a prime example of how a single, coincidental spark can ignite a disaster of historic proportions. The fire started in a small bakery on Pudding Lane owned by Thomas Fariner. It's believed that a spark from the baker's oven, left unattended overnight, caught fire and quickly spread to nearby buildings. At the time, London was a city of tightly packed wooden structures with narrow streets and little space between buildings. These conditions, combined with a strong wind, allowed the fire to grow out of control in a matter of hours. What makes this event so remarkable is the series of coincidences that allowed the fire to spread so rapidly. First, the fire began in the early morning, when most people were still asleep and unaware of the danger. Second, the dry summer weather had left the city's wooden buildings and thatched roofs highly flammable. And third, the lack of an organized firefighting force meant that efforts to contain the blaze were disorganized and ineffective. As the fire raged on, it consumed thousands of homes, businesses, and churches, including the iconic St. Paul's Cathedral. The flames burned for 4 days, leaving much of the city in ruins. By the time the fire was finally extinguished, an estimated 13,000 homes and 87 churches had been destroyed, and tens of thousands of Londoners were left homeless. But out of the ashes of this tragedy came a silver lining. The Great Fire of London led to significant changes in urban planning and building regulations. In the aftermath, new laws were introduced requiring buildings to be constructed with brick or stone instead of wood, and streets were widened to prevent future fires from spreading so quickly. These reforms not only made London safer but also laid the groundwork for modern city planning. The Great Fire of London is a stark reminder of how a single, coincidental event can have far-reaching consequences. It's fascinating to think how different the city might look today if that baker's oven had been properly extinguished that night. Instead, the fire became a turning point in London's history, shaping the city we know today. Next, we'll uncover another historical coincidence that has captivated imaginations for centuries: the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb and the so-called Curse of the Pharaohs. Now, let's journey to the sands of ancient Egypt, where one of the most famous archaeological discoveries of all time is shrouded in mystery and intrigue: the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. In 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter unearthed the tomb of the young pharaoh, untouched for over 3,000 years. What followed was a series of eerie coincidences that gave rise to the legend of the Curse of the Pharaohs, a tale that has fascinated and terrified people for decades. The story begins with the excitement surrounding the tomb's discovery. Tutankhamun, often referred to as King Tut, was a relatively obscure pharaoh who ruled during Egypt's 18th dynasty. His tomb, hidden in the Valley of the Kings, was filled with treasures beyond imagination: golden artifacts, intricate jewelry, and the iconic golden death mask that has become a symbol of ancient Egypt. But as the world marveled at the discovery, strange events began to unfold. Shortly after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon, the financial backer of the expedition, died under mysterious circumstances. He had been bitten by a mosquito, and the bite became infected, leading to his untimely death. This event sparked rumors of a curse, as it was said that a curse inscribed on the tomb warned of death to those who disturbed the pharaoh's rest. Over the next few years, several others associated with the excavation also died under unusual circumstances, fueling the myth further. While many of these deaths can be explained by natural causes or coincidence, the timing and sheer number of them created a compelling narrative. Newspapers at the time sensationalized the story, and the idea of a curse captured the public's imagination. The myth was further perpetuated by the fact that Howard Carter, the man who led the excavation, lived for many years after the discovery, seemingly unaffected by the curse. This inconsistency only added to the mystery, as people debated whether the curse was real or simply a product of superstition. The cultural impact of the Curse of the Pharaohs cannot be overstated. It inspired countless books, movies, and legends, embedding itself in popular culture as a cautionary tale about disturbing the past. The story also reflects humanity's fascination with the unknown and our tendency to seek patterns and meaning in random events. Even today, the idea of a curse continues to captivate, reminding us of the power of storytelling and the enduring allure of ancient mysteries. As we leave the sands of Egypt behind, we'll turn our attention to another historical coincidence that defies explanation: the tragic sinking of the USS Indianapolis and the chilling shark attacks that followed. Now, let's dive into the chilling waters of the Pacific Ocean, where one of the most harrowing maritime disasters in history unfolded. In July of 1945, the USS Indianapolis, a United States Navy cruiser, was on a top-secret mission to deliver components for the atomic bomb that would later be dropped on Hiroshima. After completing its mission, the ship was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine, sinking in just 12 minutes. Of the nearly 1,200 men on board, around 300 went down with the ship, leaving the rest stranded in the open ocean, facing a nightmare beyond imagination. What followed was a grueling ordeal that would etch this event into history. The survivors, scattered across the ocean, faced dehydration, exposure, and the relentless threat of shark attacks. Over the next 4 days, hundreds of men perished, not only from their injuries but also from the circling sharks that preyed on the helpless sailors. The coincidental timing of the shark attacks added a layer of horror to an already tragic event, turning it into a story of survival against insurmountable odds. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis was not just a tragedy, it was a series of coincidences that compounded the disaster. The ship's distress signals were either ignored or went unnoticed, delaying rescue efforts. By the time a passing aircraft spotted the survivors, only 316 men remained. The sheer scale of the loss and the haunting details of the shark attacks captured the public's attention, transforming the event into a historical legend. This story has since been immortalized in books, documentaries, and even popular culture, most notably in the film Jaws, where a character recounts the tale to emphasize the terror of sharks. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of human life and the unpredictable forces of nature. It also highlights how coincidental events can intertwine to create a narrative that resonates deeply with our collective imagination. As we leave the dark waters of the Pacific behind, we'll turn our attention to another bizarre and unexpected historical coincidence: the Boston molasses flood of 1919, a strange disaster that left an entire city sticky and stunned. Now, let's shift our focus from the open ocean to the bustling streets of Boston, where a strange and sticky disaster unfolded in the winter of 1919. Picture this: a massive tank standing over 50 feet tall and holding more than 2 million gallons of molasses suddenly bursts. A wave of thick, syrupy liquid, moving at an astonishing speed of 35 miles per hour, floods the streets, crushing buildings, overturning vehicles, and trapping people in its sticky grip. This was the Boston molasses flood, a bizarre and tragic event that left the city in shock and disbelief. The disaster was the result of a series of coincidental factors that turned a seemingly harmless storage tank into a deadly hazard. The tank, owned by the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, had been hastily constructed and poorly maintained. Its walls were too thin to withstand the pressure of the molasses, and the company had ignored warning signs of leaks and structural weaknesses. To make matters worse, the flood occurred during an unseasonably warm January day, which caused the molasses to expand and increase the pressure inside the tank. When the tank finally gave way, the results were catastrophic. The flood claimed the lives of 21 people and injured more than 150 others. The sticky molasses made rescue efforts incredibly difficult as it clung to everything it touched, from clothing to machinery. The cleanup took weeks, with workers using salt water to dissolve the molasses and sand to absorb it. The event became a turning point in industrial safety regulations, leading to stricter oversight and better construction standards. What makes the Boston molasses flood particularly fascinating is how a series of coincidental factors, poor construction, warm weather, and corporate negligence combined to create such an unusual disaster. It's a reminder of how even the most mundane elements like molasses can become forces of destruction under the right, or rather, wrong circumstances. As we leave the sticky streets of Boston behind, we'll turn our attention to another mysterious and explosive event, the Tunguska event of 1908, a massive explosion in Siberia that has puzzled scientists for over a century. Now, let's journey from the sticky chaos of Boston to the remote wilderness of Siberia, where an event of cosmic proportions left the world baffled. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, a massive explosion rocked the Tunguska region, flattening over 800 square miles of forest. The blast was so powerful that it was heard hundreds of miles away, and the shockwave knocked people off their feet as far as 40 miles from the epicenter. Witnesses reported seeing a bright light streaking across the sky, followed by a deafening roar and a series of tremors that shook the ground like an earthquake. What makes the Tunguska event so intriguing is the sheer scale of destruction and the mystery surrounding its cause. Scientists estimate that the explosion released energy equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, roughly 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Yet, despite the devastation, no crater was ever found. This absence of a crater has fueled countless theories over the years, ranging from the plausible to the downright fantastical. One of the most widely accepted explanations is that the explosion was caused by a meteoroid or comet entering Earth's atmosphere. The object, estimated to be around 190 feet in diameter, likely disintegrated several miles above the ground, creating a massive airburst. The intense heat and pressure from the explosion flattened trees in a radial pattern, while the lack of a crater suggests the object never actually struck the Earth's surface. However, the coincidental timing of the event has led to other, more speculative theories. Some have suggested that the explosion was the result of a natural gas eruption or even a secret experiment gone wrong. More outlandish ideas include claims of extraterrestrial involvement, such as a UFO crash or the detonation of an alien spacecraft. While these theories lack scientific evidence, they highlight the enduring fascination with the Tunguska event and its enigmatic nature. The Tunguska explosion also serves as a stark reminder of the potential dangers posed by near-Earth objects. Had the event occurred over a populated area, the consequences would have been catastrophic. Today, the Tunguska event is studied not only for its historical significance, but also as a case study in planetary defense, helping scientists better understand how to detect and mitigate similar threats in the future. As we leave the frozen forests of Siberia behind, we'll turn our attention to another historical mystery steeped in fear and superstition, the Salem witch trials, where a series of coincidental social and environmental factors ignited one of the most infamous episodes of mass hysteria in history. Now, shifting our focus from the cosmic mysteries of Siberia, we arrive in the small colonial village of Salem, Massachusetts, where a different kind of chaos unfolded, one rooted in fear, superstition, and a series of coincidental events that spiraled into one of history's most infamous episodes of mass hysteria. The Salem witch trials of 1692 began innocuously enough, with a group of young girls experiencing strange fits and claiming to be tormented by unseen forces. But what started as a local curiosity quickly escalated into a full-blown witch hunt, resulting in the execution of 20 people and the imprisonment of many more. The trials were fueled by a perfect storm of social and environmental factors. At the time, Salem was a deeply religious community where Puritan beliefs dominated daily life. The fear of the devil and his influence was ever present, and any unusual behavior was often interpreted as evidence of witchcraft. Adding to the tension was a harsh winter and a recent smallpox outbreak, which left the community on edge and searching for explanations for their suffering. These coincidental hardships created an atmosphere ripe for suspicion and blame. The accusations began with the girls, who claimed to be possessed by witches. Their fits, which included screaming, convulsions, and hallucinations, were likely influenced by a combination of psychological stress and, some historians suggest, ergot poisoning, a condition caused by consuming contaminated rye bread. This natural explanation, however, was unknown at the time, and the girls' behavior was instead seen as proof of supernatural interference. As the accusations spread, neighbors turned on one another, and the trials became a way to settle personal grudges or gain social standing. What makes the Salem witch trials particularly fascinating is how they reflect broader patterns of mass hysteria throughout history. Similar episodes have occurred in various cultures and time periods, often during times of social upheaval or crisis. The trials serve as a stark reminder of how fear and uncertainty can lead to irrational behavior and the scapegoating of vulnerable individuals. They also highlight the dangers of unchecked authority, as the legal system of the time allowed spectral evidence, testimony based on dreams or visions, to be used in court, further fueling the chaos. The legacy of the Salem witch trials endures as a cautionary tale about the consequences of fear and prejudice. While the trials themselves lasted only a few months, their impact on American history and culture has been profound, influencing everything from literature to legal reforms. As we move forward, we'll explore another historical coincidence that shaped the course of a nation, the Battle of New Orleans, a conflict fought after the war it was part of had already ended. Now, let's journey from the eerie shadows of Salem to the muddy banks of the Mississippi River, where another remarkable historical coincidence unfolded, one that would leave an indelible mark on American pride and identity. The Battle of New Orleans, fought in January 1815, is a striking example of how timing and miscommunication can shape history in unexpected ways. What makes this battle so extraordinary is that it took place after the War of 1812 had officially ended, yet it became one of the most celebrated victories in American history. The War of 1812, often called America's Second War of Independence, was a conflict between the United States and Great Britain, sparked by trade disputes, British impressment of American sailors, and territorial ambitions. By late 1814, both sides were weary of the prolonged fighting, and negotiations for peace had begun in Ghent, Belgium. On December 24, 1814, the Treaty of Ghent was signed, officially ending the war. However, due to the slow pace of communication in the early 19th century, news of the treaty did not reach the United States in time to prevent one final dramatic clash. Meanwhile, in New Orleans, American forces under the command of General Andrew Jackson were preparing for a British invasion. The British, seeking to gain control of the vital port city, launched an attack on January 8, 1815. Jackson's ragtag army, composed of regular soldiers, militia, free African Americans, Native Americans, and even pirates, faced off against a seasoned British force. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, Jackson's troops used the terrain to their advantage, fortifying their position behind earthworks and repelling the British assault with devastating accuracy. The battle lasted less than 2 hours, but the results were staggering. The British suffered over 2,000 casualties, while the Americans lost fewer than 100. The timing of the battle is what makes it so coincidental. Just 2 weeks earlier, the war had officially ended, but neither side on the battlefield knew it. The victory at New Orleans, though technically unnecessary, had profound implications. It bolstered American morale and cemented Andrew Jackson's reputation as a national hero, paving the way for his eventual presidency. The battle also solidified the United States' sense of independence and resilience, proving that the young nation could stand up to a global superpower. This coincidence highlights the unpredictable nature of history and how events can take on a life of their own, even when their original purpose has passed. The Battle of New Orleans became a symbol of American determination and unity, a story that continues to inspire generations. As we move forward, we'll uncover another twist of fate, this time involving a lost colony and a mystery that has puzzled historians for centuries. Now, let's shift our focus from the triumphant echoes of New Orleans to a haunting mystery that has baffled historians for centuries: the disappearance of the Roanoke colony. In the late 16th century, a group of English settlers arrived on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina, with hopes of establishing the first permanent English settlement in the New World. Led by John White, the colony seemed poised for success, but when White returned to England for supplies in 1587, he could never have imagined the eerie scene that would greet him upon his return 3 years later. In 1590, White finally made it back to Roanoke, only to find the colony completely abandoned. The settlers had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a few cryptic clues. The word Croatoan was carved into a wooden post, and the letters Crow were etched into a nearby tree. These markings suggested the settlers might have relocated to Croatoan Island, now known as Hatteras Island, but no definitive evidence of their fate has ever been found. What makes this disappearance so coincidental is the timing of White's departure and return. Just before he left for England, his daughter gave birth to the first English child born in the Americas, Virginia Dare. Her birth symbolized hope for the colony's future, but her fate, along with that of the other settlers, remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The colony's disappearance coincided with a period of strained relations with local indigenous tribes and the threat of Spanish invasion, adding layers of complexity to the story. Over the centuries, numerous theories have emerged to explain the colony's fate. Some believe the settlers integrated with nearby indigenous communities, while others suggest they fell victim to disease, famine, or conflict. The lack of concrete evidence has only deepened the intrigue, turning Roanoke into a symbol of the unknown and the unexplained. This enduring mystery reminds us that history is not always a clear narrative, but often a puzzle with missing pieces. The coincidental clues left behind at Roanoke, like the carved words, and the timing of White's journey continue to spark curiosity and debate, keeping the story alive in our collective imagination. As we move forward, we'll explore another twist of fate, this time involving a tragic maritime disaster and the coincidental events that turned it into a legend. Now, let's turn our attention from the enigmatic disappearance of Roanoke to a moment in history that sent shockwaves across the globe: the Great Depression and the stock market crash of 1929. This period of economic collapse didn't just reshape the United States. It altered the course of world history in ways that still resonate today. The story begins in the Roaring '20s, a time of unprecedented economic growth and cultural change. Stock prices soared, and many believed the good times would never end. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Overproduction in industries like agriculture and manufacturing, coupled with excessive speculation in the stock market, created a fragile economic foundation. Then, on October 24, 1929, the bubble burst. Known as Black Thursday, the stock market began its dramatic plunge, wiping out fortunes in a matter of hours. What makes this event so coincidental is the perfect storm of factors that came together at just the wrong time. The stock market crash wasn't the sole cause of the Great Depression, but it acted as a catalyst, exposing deeper economic vulnerabilities. Banks failed, businesses closed, and unemployment skyrocketed, leaving millions in dire straits. The timing of the crash coincided with a global economic downturn, making recovery even more difficult. The Great Depression reshaped not only economies but also governments and societies. In the United States, President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced the New Deal, a series of programs aimed at providing relief, recovery, and reform. Meanwhile, in Europe, the economic turmoil contributed to the rise of extremist political movements, setting the stage for World War II. This period of history serves as a stark reminder of how interconnected and fragile global systems can be. The coincidental alignment of economic missteps and external pressures created a crisis that no one could have predicted. Yet, it also sparked innovation and resilience, leading to reforms that would prevent similar disasters in the future. As we move forward, we'll explore another pivotal moment in history, one where a single technological failure led to a mission that became known as a successful failure. Stay tuned as we uncover the story of Apollo 13 and the coincidental events that turned a potential disaster into a triumph of human ingenuity. Shifting our focus from the economic turmoil of the Great Depression, we now turn to a moment in history where technology, politics, and human error collided with devastating consequences: the Chernobyl disaster of 1986. This catastrophic event not only marked a turning point in nuclear safety, but also played a coincidental role in the decline of the Soviet Union, a superpower already grappling with internal and external pressures. The story begins on April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union. During a routine safety test, a combination of design flaws and operator errors led to a massive explosion in reactor number 4. The blast released an unprecedented amount of radioactive material into the atmosphere, creating a disaster of global proportions. What makes this event so coincidental is its timing. The Chernobyl disaster occurred at a critical juncture in Soviet history. The Soviet Union, under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, was already struggling with economic stagnation, political unrest, and the growing demands for reform. The disaster exposed the flaws in the Soviet system, its lack of transparency, bureaucratic inefficiency, and disregard for safety. The Soviet government initially tried to downplay the severity of the incident, but as radioactive clouds spread across Europe, the truth became impossible to hide. The international backlash was swift and severe, damaging the Soviet Union's reputation on the global stage. Domestically, the disaster fueled public distrust in the government and intensified calls for change. In the years that followed, Chernobyl became a symbol of the Soviet Union's decline. The economic cost of the cleanup, estimated in the tens of billions of dollars, further strained an already fragile economy. Meanwhile, the disaster accelerated the push for glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, or restructuring, policies that ultimately contributed to the unraveling of the Soviet Union by 1991. The long-term consequences of Chernobyl are still felt today. The disaster led to significant advancements in nuclear safety protocols worldwide, but it also left a lasting environmental and human toll. The exclusion zone around the plant remains uninhabitable, and the health effects on those exposed to radiation continue to be studied. As we reflect on this pivotal moment, it's clear that the Chernobyl disaster was more than just a tragic accident. It was a coincidental catalyst that exposed the vulnerabilities of a superpower and reshaped the course of history. Next, we'll explore another remarkable story of human ingenuity and resilience as we delve into the Apollo 13 mission and its unexpected journey through space. Stay tuned. Now, let's journey from the shadows of Chernobyl to the vast expanse of space, where another extraordinary story of coincidence and human resilience unfolds: the Apollo 13 mission. Often referred to as a successful failure, this mission stands as a testament to ingenuity, teamwork, and the unpredictable nature of exploration. The Apollo 13 mission launched on April 11, 1970, with the goal of landing astronauts on the Moon. Just 2 days into the journey, however, disaster struck. An oxygen tank in the service module exploded, crippling the spacecraft and leaving astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes stranded over 200,000 miles from Earth. The explosion not only jeopardized their mission but also their survival. What makes this event so coincidental is the series of unlikely malfunctions that followed. The explosion damaged critical systems, including the spacecraft's power and life support. The crew was forced to shut down the command module, their only means of returning to Earth, and rely on the lunar module as a makeshift lifeboat. This unplanned use of the lunar module was never part of the original mission design, yet it became their lifeline. The challenges didn't end there. The crew faced a shortage of power, water, and breathable air. Carbon dioxide levels began to rise dangerously, threatening their lives. Engineers on the ground worked around the clock to devise solutions, including a makeshift carbon dioxide filter using materials available on the spacecraft. This ingenious fix, born out of necessity, became one of the most celebrated moments in spaceflight history. Against all odds, the crew of Apollo 13 returned safely to Earth on April 17th, splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. Their survival was a triumph of human ingenuity and collaboration, but it also highlighted the fragility of space exploration. The mission's coincidental malfunctions forced NASA to reevaluate its safety protocols and spacecraft design, leading to significant advancements in future missions. The legacy of Apollo 13 extends far beyond its technical achievements. It demonstrated the power of problem-solving under pressure and the importance of adaptability in the face of uncertainty. The mission also captured the world's imagination, reminding us of the risks and rewards of pushing the boundaries of human exploration. As we reflect on this remarkable story, it's clear that Apollo 13 was more than just a mission. It was a turning point in space exploration. Next, we'll step back in time to ancient Rome, where a fateful day in March changed the course of history forever. Stay with us as we uncover the coincidences surrounding the assassination of Julius Caesar. Now, let's turn our attention from the stars to the ancient streets of Rome, where a single day in March changed the course of history forever. The assassination of Julius Caesar on the Ides of March 15, 44 BC is one of the most dramatic and coincidental events in history, filled with eerie warnings and omens that seem almost too strange to be true. Julius Caesar, a powerful Roman general and statesman, had risen to become the dictator of Rome, but his growing authority made him many enemies. Among them was a group of senators who feared his ambition and believed his death was necessary to save the Republic. What makes this story so fascinating are the numerous coincidental signs that foreshadowed his demise. In the days leading up to his assassination, Caesar received multiple warnings. A soothsayer famously told him to beware the Ides of March, a phrase that has echoed through history. Caesar dismissed the warning, but the coincidences didn't stop there. His wife, Calpurnia, had a vivid dream the night before his death, in which she saw him lying lifeless in her arms. She begged him not to go to the Senate that day, but Caesar, influenced by one of his conspirators, ignored her pleas. Even nature seemed to send signals. Strange occurrences were reported, such as birds behaving erratically and sacrificial animals found without hearts, omens that Romans took very seriously. Yet, despite these signs, Caesar walked into the Senate on the Ides of March, where he was surrounded by his betrayers. In a brutal and coordinated attack, he was stabbed 23 times, with his close friend Brutus delivering one of the final blows. The assassination of Julius Caesar wasn't just a political act, It was a turning point that plunged Rome into chaos and ultimately led to the end of the Roman Republic. The coincidental warnings surrounding his death have captivated historians and storytellers for centuries, adding an air of mystery to this pivotal moment. Culturally, the Ides of March has become synonymous with betrayal and fate. Shakespeare immortalized the event in his play Julius Caesar, where the phrase "Et tu, Brute," "You too, Brutus," has become a symbol of ultimate betrayal. The story reminds us of the fragility of power and the unpredictable nature of history. As we reflect on this dramatic chapter, it's impossible not to wonder how different the world might be if Caesar had heeded the warnings. Next, we'll travel even further back in time to explore how a devastating plague reshaped the course of Europe. Stay with us as we uncover the coincidental factors behind the Black Death. Now, let's journey back to the 14th century, a time when Europe faced one of the most devastating pandemics in human history, the Black Death. This catastrophic event didn't just claim millions of lives, it also reshaped the very fabric of European society in ways that were both tragic and, in some cases, surprisingly transformative. What makes the Black Death so intriguing are the coincidental factors that allowed it to spread so rapidly and with such devastating consequences. The Black Death, believed to have been caused by the bubonic plague, arrived in Europe in the 1340s, carried by fleas on rats aboard merchant ships from Asia. But it wasn't just the disease itself that made it so deadly, it was the perfect storm of coincidental conditions that allowed it to thrive. Europe at the time was densely populated, with cities growing rapidly and sanitation systems lagging far behind. The close quarters and unsanitary living conditions created an ideal environment for the plague to spread like wildfire. Adding to the chaos was the fact that medieval medicine was ill-equipped to handle such a crisis. Doctors, relying on outdated theories and lacking an understanding of germ theory, were powerless to stop the disease. Superstition and fear ran rampant, with many blaming the plague on everything from poisoned wells to divine punishment. These coincidental factors, poor sanitation, overcrowding, and limited medical knowledge combined to create a disaster of unprecedented scale. By the time the Black Death subsided, it had wiped out an estimated 1/3 of Europe's population. But out of this tragedy emerged profound societal changes. The massive loss of life led to labor shortages, which in turn gave surviving workers more bargaining power. Serfs and peasants, once bound to the land, found themselves in higher demand, leading to the gradual decline of feudalism. Wages rose and social mobility increased, laying the groundwork for the Renaissance and the eventual rise of the modern era. The Black Death also had a lasting impact on art, culture, and religion. The constant presence of death influenced the themes of medieval art, with many works depicting the fragility of life and the inevitability of mortality. Religiously, the trauma of the plague led to both a deepening of faith and, in some cases, a questioning of the Church's authority, as people struggled to make sense of the suffering around them. As we reflect on the Black Death, it's striking to consider how a series of coincidental factors, trade routes, living conditions, and medical limitations combined to create a catastrophe that reshaped the world. The plague reminds us of the delicate balance of history and how even the darkest moments can lead to unexpected transformations. Next, we'll fast forward to the 20th century, where another pivotal event, the fall of the Berlin Wall, marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in global history. Stay with us as we explore the coincidental events that brought down this iconic symbol of division. Now, let's shift our focus to a moment that marked the end of an era and the dawn of a new chapter in global history, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. This iconic event didn't just symbolize the collapse of a physical barrier, it represented the crumbling of ideological divides that had defined the world for decades. What makes the fall of the Berlin Wall so fascinating are the coincidental events and missteps that led to its sudden and unexpected collapse. The Berlin Wall, erected in 1961, was more than just a concrete structure. It was a powerful symbol of the Cold War, dividing East and West Germany, and by extension, the communist and capitalist worlds. For nearly 3 decades, it stood as a stark reminder of the tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States. But by the late 1980s, cracks were beginning to show in the Iron Curtain, both literally and figuratively. One of the key coincidental factors was the series of political changes sweeping across Eastern Europe. The rise of reformist leaders like Mikhail Gorbachev in the Soviet Union, who introduced policies of glasnost and perestroika, created an atmosphere of openness and change. These reforms emboldened citizens in East Germany to demand greater freedoms, leading to widespread protests and demonstrations. Then came the fateful press conference on November 9, 1989, when East German official Günter Schabowski mistakenly announced that travel restrictions to the West would be lifted immediately. His vague and poorly worded statement led to confusion, and within hours, thousands of East Berliners flocked to the wall, demanding to cross. Overwhelmed and unprepared, border guards eventually relented and the wall was opened. The fall of the Berlin Wall was not just a moment of celebration, it was a turning point in history. It marked the beginning of the end for the Cold War, as the Soviet Union's influence waned and Eastern European nations began to break free from communist rule. The wall's collapse also symbolized the triumph of freedom and democracy over oppression, resonating far beyond Germany's borders. What's remarkable is how a series of coincidental events, political reforms, a miscommunicated announcement, and the sheer determination of ordinary people combined to bring down a structure that had seemed unshakable. The fall of the Berlin Wall reminds us that history is often shaped by unexpected moments and the actions of individuals who dare to challenge the status quo. As we move forward, we'll explore another pivotal moment in history, the discovery of America and the coincidental factors that led Christopher Columbus to the New World. Stay with us as we uncover how a miscalculation changed the course of history forever. Now, let's set sail for a journey that reshaped the world as we know it, the discovery of America. What makes this moment so extraordinary is not just the act of discovery itself, but the series of coincidental miscalculations and unexpected turns that brought Christopher Columbus to the shores of the New World. Columbus, an Italian explorer sailing under the Spanish flag, set out in 1492 with a bold plan to find a westward route to Asia. At the time, the idea of reaching the East by sailing west was considered risky, if not outright impossible. But Columbus was convinced that the Earth was smaller than most believed, and he calculated that a direct westward voyage would bring him to the riches of Asia. Here's where the coincidences come into play. Columbus's calculations were based on flawed assumptions. He underestimated the size of the Earth and overestimated the size of Asia, leading him to believe that the journey would be far shorter than it actually was. Had he known the true distance, he might never have embarked on the voyage, but his miscalculation turned out to be one of history's most fortunate errors. After weeks at sea, with his crew growing restless and supplies dwindling, Columbus finally spotted land on October 12, 1492. Instead of reaching Asia as he had intended, he had stumbled upon the Bahamas. This accidental discovery marked the first sustained contact between Europe and the Americas, setting off a chain of events that would forever alter the course of history. The consequences of Columbus's voyage were profound. It opened the door to European exploration and colonization of the Americas, leading to the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures between the Old World and the New, a phenomenon known as the Columbian Exchange. Crops like potatoes, tomatoes, and maize were introduced to Europe, while horses, wheat, and diseases like smallpox were brought to the Americas. But this exchange was not without its dark side. The arrival of Europeans brought devastating consequences for the indigenous populations, including displacement, exploitation, and the spread of deadly diseases. The discovery of America, while a turning point in global history, also marked the beginning of a complex and often tragic chapter for the native peoples of the Americas. What's fascinating is how a single miscalculation, a mistake in navigation, led to one of the most significant events in human history. Columbus's voyage reminds us that history is often shaped by chance, error, and the unpredictable outcomes of human ambition. As we continue our exploration of historical coincidences, we'll turn our attention to another pivotal moment: the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi and its impact on India's struggle for independence. Stay with us as we uncover how this event changed the course of a nation's history. Now, let's shift our focus to a moment that not only shook a nation, but also marked a turning point in its history: the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. This event, occurring just months after India gained independence from British rule, carries with it a profound sense of irony and coincidence that continues to resonate today. Gandhi, often referred to as the father of the nation, was a central figure in India's struggle for independence. His philosophy of non-violent resistance, or satyagraha, inspired millions and played a pivotal role in ending British colonial rule. On August 15, 1947, India finally achieved independence, a moment of triumph that Gandhi had worked tirelessly to bring about. Yet, less than 6 months later, on January 30, 1948, Gandhi was assassinated by Nathuram Godse, a Hindu nationalist who opposed Gandhi's efforts to promote peace and unity between Hindus and Muslims. The timing of his death was deeply symbolic. Just as India was stepping into its newfound freedom, the man who had led the charge for that freedom was taken away. What makes this event even more striking is the coincidence of its timing. Gandhi's assassination occurred at a critical juncture in India's history, as the nation grappled with the aftermath of partition, a violent and chaotic division that created India and Pakistan. Gandhi had been working tirelessly to heal the wounds of partition, advocating for harmony and reconciliation. His death, coming so soon after independence, left a void in the leadership of the fledgling nation and marked a tragic end to a life dedicated to peace. The impact of Gandhi's assassination was profound. It not only shocked the nation but also served as a stark reminder of the challenges India faced in its early years as an independent country. His death forced India to confront the deep divisions within its society and to reckon with the legacy of his teachings. While Gandhi's vision of a united, non-violent India remains a guiding ideal, his assassination underscored the difficulties of achieving that vision in a world fraught with conflict. This moment in history reminds us that even in times of triumph, tragedy can strike, altering the course of events in ways no one could have foreseen. Gandhi's life and death are a testament to the power of coincidence and the unpredictable nature of history. As we move forward, we'll explore another pivotal event: the sinking of the Lusitania and its role in drawing the United States into World War I. Stay with us as we uncover how a single incident can change the trajectory of global conflict. Now, let's set sail into the turbulent waters of World War I, where a single ship's fate would ripple across the globe and alter the course of history. The sinking of the Lusitania in 1915 is one of those moments where coincidence and tragedy collide, creating a turning point that would ultimately draw the United States into the war. The Lusitania, a British ocean liner, was known for its speed and luxury, often carrying passengers and cargo across the Atlantic. But in the spring of 1915, the ship found itself caught in the crossfire of a brutal war. Germany had declared the waters around Britain a war zone, warning that any ships entering the area could be targeted by their submarines or U-boats. Despite these warnings, the Lusitania set sail from New York on May 1st, carrying nearly 2,000 passengers, including over 100 Americans. What makes this event so striking is the series of coincidences that led to its tragic outcome. Just days before the Lusitania's departure, Germany had placed an advertisement in American newspapers cautioning passengers against traveling on British ships. Many dismissed this as mere propaganda, but the warning proved eerily accurate. On May 7th, as the Lusitania approached the coast of Ireland, it was struck by a torpedo from a German U-boat. The ship sank in just 18 minutes, taking the lives of nearly 1,200 people, including 128 Americans. The sinking of the Lusitania sent shockwaves across the world, but its impact was particularly profound in the United States. At the time, America had maintained a policy of neutrality in the war, but the loss of American lives aboard the Lusitania ignited outrage and shifted public opinion. President Woodrow Wilson, who had been determined to keep the U.S. out of the conflict, faced mounting pressure to respond, while it would take another 2 years for the U.S. to formally enter the war. The sinking of the Lusitania marked a critical turning point, planting the seeds of intervention. What's even more fascinating is the role of coincidence in this event. The Lusitania was carrying not only passengers but also a secret cargo of munitions destined for Britain, a fact that Germany later used to justify the attack. This hidden detail adds another layer of complexity to the story, blurring the lines between civilian and military targets. The sinking became a powerful symbol of the horrors of modern warfare, highlighting the vulnerability of even the most advanced ships to new, devastating technologies. The Lusitania's sinking reminds us how a single event, shaped by a web of coincidences, can have far-reaching consequences. It wasn't just a tragedy at sea. It was a catalyst that helped propel the United States into a global conflict, reshaping the course of World War I and ultimately the 20th century. As we move forward, we'll explore one final coincidence that took humanity to new heights: the moon landing of 1969 and its significance in the space race. Stay with us as we uncover how this monumental achievement became a defining moment in history. Now, let's take a giant leap from the depths of the ocean to the vast expanse of space, where humanity achieved one of its most extraordinary feats. The moon landing of 1969 wasn't just a triumph of science and engineering. It was also a moment steeped in coincidence, shaped by the intense rivalry of the Cold War and the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. The space race began in earnest in the late 1950s, as both superpowers sought to prove their technological and ideological superiority. The Soviet Union struck first, launching the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, in 1957, and sending the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into orbit in 1961. These milestones sent shockwaves through the United States, prompting President John F. Kennedy to set an audacious goal: landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. What makes the moon landing so remarkable is the timing. The Apollo 11 mission touched down on the lunar surface on July 20, 1969, just as the Cold War was reaching a critical point. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a tense standoff, not just in space but also on Earth, with conflicts like the Vietnam War and the Cuban Missile Crisis casting long shadows. The moon landing became a symbol of American ingenuity and determination, a moment of unity and pride during a deeply divided time. But the coincidences don't end there. The Apollo 11 mission was launched on July 16th, just days before the deadline Kennedy had set nearly a decade earlier. The successful landing fulfilled his vision almost to the day, a testament to the incredible effort and resources poured into the program. And while the mission was a scientific achievement, it was also a cultural phenomenon. An estimated 600 million people around the world watched as Neil Armstrong took his first steps on the moon, uttering the now iconic words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The moon landing had profound cultural and scientific impacts. It inspired a generation to dream big, fueling interest in science, technology, and exploration. It also marked a turning point in the space race, as the United States effectively claimed victory in this high-stakes competition. But perhaps most importantly, It reminded humanity of what we can achieve when we work together toward a common goal. As we reflect on these 25 historical coincidences, it's clear that history is often shaped by moments of chance, where timing, circumstance, and human ambition intersect in unexpected ways. From the depths of the ocean to the surface of the moon, these events remind us that even the smallest details can have far-reaching consequences. Thanks for joining us on this journey through history's most mind-blowing coincidences. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more fascinating stories from the past. Until next time, keep exploring. And so, as we come to the end of our journey through these 25 astonishing historical coincidences, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on what they reveal about the nature of history itself. These events remind us that history isn't just a series of planned actions or predictable outcomes, it's also shaped by chance, timing, and the unexpected. From the eerie parallels between Lincoln and Kennedy to the prophetic sinking of the Titanic, and from the bizarre Great Emu War to the monumental moon landing, these coincidences challenge us to see history as a tapestry woven with threads of both intention and serendipity. What's truly fascinating is how these moments of chance often ripple far beyond their immediate context, altering the course of nations, cultures, and even the world. They remind us that even the smallest details, a wrong turn, a forgotten novel, or a baker's oven, can set off a chain of events with profound consequences. These coincidences also invite us to question how much of history is shaped by human agency and how much is left to the whims of fate. As we close, we'd love to hear from you. Which of these coincidences surprised you the most? Are there other historical oddities or moments of chance that you find equally mind-blowing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're always eager to learn from our incredible community of history enthusiasts. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's most fascinating coincidences, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more stories that bring the past to life. Thanks for joining us on this journey through time, and remember, history is full of surprises, so keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering. Until next time.